This episode of Future Cities Africa is brought to you in partnership with Digital Council Africa. Steve Apps is my guest today on Future Cities Africa. He's a smart city and Industry 4.0 technology expert. Steve is a past CTO of Huawei Southern Africa for government services. He was also executive for ecosystems and solutions at SqwidNet, rolling out the SIGFOX IoT network across South Africa. Steve, welcome. It's an honor to have you. Give us a quick tour of your background, major highlights, and current work.
So I started off in England, where I became qualified as an electronics and telecommunications engineer. Then I was very lucky to be taken on by an American company, by Northrop Grumman, a very large technology and system integrator, where I got to work on the UK's Tetra networks to provide emergency services to the ambulance, fire, and that's when I managed to experience probably everything to do with narrowband communications, end applications. And I did some work on even medical equipment to collect people's vitals. I then married a South African, and I chose to come and live in South Africa. Great choice. Love it here. It's far sunnier and more fun than back home in England. And I found myself drawn towards the power sector and smart grids as the area needing attention. So I applied a lot of my knowledge with telecommunications to improving the grid and advising and consulting and implementing smart grid solutions. I then was fortunate enough to move on to Accenture, where as a senior manager, I got to understand a lot more about management consultancy, the finances around a business running organizations. So coupled with all that knowledge, I went back and became a director of another consultancy and helped advise the government in a lot of areas. And then I came across SIGFOX, loved the technology. So working with dark fiber to create SqwidNet, I moved there, and it was a fantastic experience, fantastic technology, and wonderful times there. But then the opportunity with Huawei was just too good to miss. And I worked on a lot of systems integration, a lot of work across all sectors of the Industry 4. Spent a while working in Shenzhen on research and development. And I finished off my time there consulting and advising and designing smart cities. I left there a couple of months ago, and I'm now looking at seeing what post-COVID world looks like and where it's best to apply my knowledge and experience.
Let's jump into smart cities. What is your definition of a smart city in the South African and then also in the African context?
So, the definition of a smart city is very convoluted, and there's many explanations, and none of them really hit the nail on the head apart from helping whoever's written that agenda. But to me, it's essentially you're taking data or information and you're processing it to get a wider, better view of how the city's running. So to me, it's taking a lot of data which is normally held in different silos, and you can't actually look at all the data together, combining it all and be able to analyze and search that and make far better strategic and immediate decisions and move forward, also making better use of your assets. When you look at your typical smart city, you look at places like London, Bristol, New York, Shenzhen, Singapore, but they have a strong infrastructure. They've got reliable electricity, they've got reliable water, sewage, they've got good housing, they've got high education. So it's almost like providing almost your luxury on top of it and making a more comfortable lifestyle. In the South African content, and I got to understand this a lot more with some work I did with Mauritius, is without having stable, reliable electricity all the time, it's not really possible to have a smart city, because you're not actually collecting the data, but the businesses won't want to move in there because, if they can't run, they can't use their data, they can't store, or they can't provide services to the rest of the world, then that's not viable. So I think when we're looking at Africa as a whole, we have to look at the foundational elements to enable the digital transformation of the workforce so they can actually provide global services. So we're looking at basic services really and using that intelligence to help it.
Looking at some of the key barriers in South Africa to implement smart cities, what are some of these key barriers with regards to municipalities achieving smart city status? You mentioned lack of power or insufficient power. What other challenges are there and what can stop us from becoming smarter cities?
So with smart cities, they're incredibly technically complex, and it requires a lot of domain knowledge to work with it. You have to work with the data. So building up these skills and capabilities to be able to design that, implement it, and keep it running is going to be a big task for any municipality. The amount of data you need to collect and to be able to work with the communications. I mean, a simple example is if we take the smart meter, you have an installation engineer who knows how to wire up a meter, but he's now got to know telecommunications to make sure it works. He needs to know how to configure it, so he needs some IT knowledge and those kind of things. And it becomes a lot more complicated fast. Financing. In our economic state at the moment, it's not a conducive environment for private investors or external investors to invest in these things unless you can show a return on profit. A lot of what the municipalities need to do is to help the low income sectors to be able to improve their lifestyle and provide them decent medical services and decent roads and other stuff, which generally wouldn't be profitable for a private organization. There are ways around it, but these are challenges, and to be able to look comprehensively and holistically across the whole city and not necessarily go in a direction of where some of the bigger companies would send you.
Speaking about financial models, what are some of the key financial models that municipalities can implement to fund these smart cities? Is it triple Ps? Are those the best examples, or should they simply allow smart cities?
So triple Ps, depending on how you use them, they can be successful or they can cause you big problems, which is why you need to be careful. They can provide the inflow of money to be able to start off rebuilding your infrastructure and to move you forward, but you can get tied into their agenda. You are building projects and direction which is to their benefit. You could have problems using their technologies because, open technologies, the world is working hard on open smart city technologies, but we're a long way from that yet. So that could be challenging. And also, it's been experienced often globally. The PPPs may not make a profit, or they don't provide a service as good as what you'd expect if it was run by government, because they don't have that long-term knowledge of urban planning and working with the people and servicing the citizens without an eye to making a profit. So it's a case of, you want to work with them, but it's to, look at it closely and make sure that it works well for you. A lot of the, I think, approaches the municipalities have to say is to try and work out ways to stop the bleed, turn it around. And even if it's just in one sector, like tourism or something else, show that you're able to turn or to be able to make money. If the investors can start seeing that you're able to actually start getting people in and they're safe and they're comfortable and other stuff, they'll see the potential for them to make a profit, and then they'll come and then they will provide the revenue and the funding you require to achieve moving forwards. Low-hanging fruit is maybe to work on smart street poles. Smart street poles seem a very nice, easy way to start improving your security, improving your communications, increasing the visibility on existing infrastructure. So that's an excellent way to start.
From your experiences at Huawei and SqwidNet, part of Dark Fiber Africa, how do we improve private and public sector collaboration? What are some of the steps that needs to be taken, and who takes the first step?
So, a lot of it is, private participation is only going to happen if it's profitable. It has to be profitable, because if it's not, then you're unable to provide the technologies, provide the training, provide the skills and capabilities you require. So you need to be able to provide them the ability to make sufficient return of capital that they're happy to invest on areas which is important for the municipality to move things forward. So it's almost like a trade-off and balancing between them. And I think the private companies have to be prepared to, take on what would seem non-profitable projects, but look at it holistically as a balance across all the projects they're getting, to be able to see an overall total profit rather than everything must have a profit. And I think then, if we can have that understanding and compromise, then we may look at a way to actually start making a difference. And then after a while, the net profit will be positive. And I think also the time period for contracts needs to be looked at. Often just a 3-year contract is not long enough to implement and get results. So probably a lot longer term contracts need to be considered.
On IoT, we already have more IoT devices in the world than human beings. Where are we currently with IoT in Africa, and what role do you see it playing in smarter and future cities?
Africa is generally ahead of the rest of the world in using RF and wireless technology, where the rest of the world started off with fixed connections, fiber, telephony and everything else. Due to the nature of Africa, we are far more wireless. So we're quite advanced and very innovative when it comes to the wireless technology. So I think we are far better set to be able to use that and use that kind of technology and innovate on using the narrowband communications. We need to use the narrowband communications because using typically your bigger broadband communications is like a challenge based on its coverage area and the size of the continent. And we need to use a lot of it to provide further information to help address our educational challenges with the workforce, and to be able to provide them the direction, input and help they require. So like in agriculture, where you're providing these farms to the new farmers, and they might not know the best time to harvest. They know how to harvest perfectly, but they might not know when to harvest because of that experience. With that technology, you can now say, now you should harvest. And then suddenly they're making money. So a simple example, but it's kind of the point. With, as I say, the likes of SIGFOX, with LoRa, you have things like NB-IoT and other IoT, when we're looking now at Wi-Fi IoT, which is exciting, very, very exciting. And the potential of 5G, all of them plays a space and a part, and you need, all of them. And with all of those, it's very exciting to be able to actually start getting the information and the data we need to move forward. Now, the big challenge then is taking all that data and processing it, because it's actually the data and the visualization of data, what you do with the data, which is the important thing. The device and the data it collects is worth nothing if you don't actually use that data properly. So we need to, as Africa, be able to keep it as sovereign data, so it stays within the country. It belongs to Africa. We process it ourselves and work on it. Build out the expertise in artificial intelligence to process that as we would want to, make decisions moving forward. So I think it's very exciting. And one thing I thought was exciting from an IoT perspective is we talk about facial recognition and needing fiber connectivity and broadband communications. But now you can get intelligent cameras which can actually do all of that recognition on the edge. And then you can have an IoT connection, very low bandwidth, just to send the results of what it's found. So you don't actually send the image. So now you can head to the site and you've recognized the person you're going to, you know where they are, which is still far, far more than we have at the moment. And it's, valuable information. And that is, I think, a wonderful tool with just IoT, which overcomes a lot of the bandwidth restraints we have.
So you've mentioned the collection of a lot of data. I know that data is still being kind of used in pockets in South Africa and in siloed operations. How would you suggest we break down those silos and have more open data?
This is obviously challenging because, for a lot of companies, that data is their revenue. So therefore, it's a case of, with the smart cities, generally the preferred design approach to advise the city of is a data lake, where all of the city's information from all their departments, everything else is fed into a single data lake, so that you can access and share and use that data across all departments. And then you make a lot of that data, which is not commercially or operationally sensitive, you open that as open data to the communities. And then data which are prepared to share. For example, some of the cities have got plans in place where the security cameras of homeowners, that information is fed back into these data lakes. So that some of the emergency services have real-time view of what's feeding through your camera, so they have far better visibility and they can actually make far better decisions. And you don't even need to call the emergency services anymore because they know what's happening. They can get to you before maybe you've known something's happening, which is an exciting way forward. I think it's starting off with a data lake and then having sovereign cloud. That is cloud implementation, public cloud, or something which can maintain the data within the country and held by the organizations within the country so they can make the best use of it, rather than it being held outside the country and being used for other purposes. That is a big challenge, and I think it's something which each country needs to start looking at quite deeply. And then, I think there probably have to be regulations to saying what data has to be made available. And I think it's very important for overall equal growth among all the citizens in the country, so that you get full upliftment.
You are currently doing a lot of work on civilization engineering. What exactly does civilization engineering comprise of, and can you share some examples? You mentioned Brazil.
I've started collaborating with several experts globally. And one of the experts I've worked with, he works on civilization design and how to approach the population of the planet from there. And it's working from the bottom up rather than the top down. So typically when we're looking at a city, you're looking at, you bring in a large technology company, you put in your cloud systems, you put in your data layers, you put in your microservices, and you go on from there. Whereas this is looking at it from the fact of you enabling and getting the citizens to actually start developing and working on and collaborating together to start creating the solutions, applications the city needs. And they kind of almost socially create and develop those applications, and they have the right kind of financial tools to make them move forward. So it's very important that they can have access to new currencies, maybe digitally orientated currencies that they can access easily. They can move things about. They have better marketplaces. They have the right platforms to achieve that. They can actually collaborate and move in that direction. And it's almost like an online digital marketplace, like you have the markets tool. And it works quite strongly in that direction, and it's taking up speed and direction globally. It's obviously not the easiest thing to do, because how do you fund it to move it forward, and how do you persuade people to go in that direction? So it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg, but I think it's, it can't be done in isolation. You need the top down and the bottom up together. So you have to do both. But it's working on this field of thought and trying to work out how to do that. An example, one that I like, which is maybe a bit left field or a bit out there, but in Brazil, there's an initiative where they're providing gamification in all the high schools and colleges where they have the computers and everything else. And it's like you're trying your ideas and everything, and you're modeling it on the scenario of where the country is at the moment, where it is economically impact, whether it's to work with the global development, the sustainability development goals, or other aspects which are important to start turning the planet around. And they all working on all the time, and they're trying out these models, these directions. They're trying to see what works and see what can make a difference and see what they should try and do. And obviously they're all working together, so they're all interacting. And it seems to be making a massive difference and creating great education on how we should change doing business and how we should change, improve our lifestyles accordingly. And it's a huge, amazing template to try and see how that can work globally.
If we talk about blockchain, what role do you see blockchain playing in Africa's future in cities? Do you see it playing any role going forward within the next, say, 10 years? Is there actually real world applications of blockchain solutions that you see working?
So blockchain, we need to look at it as a technology, of which one of the applications of it is digital currencies. I think digital currencies are going to become far more prominent moving forward. To enable easier trade globally and trying to try and stabilize your losses between different currencies everywhere else. I think it's going to become more prominent, and there's a lot of research on how to do that. And another one of the experts I'm working with from New York is one of the leading experts in that domain, and they've done a lot of modeling on how to take that forward. And I'm just starting to go through my research and reading on how to work with that. And there's a couple of large organizations. One of them is called Zebra United, where there's several hundred of the global experts in this domain are collaborating and working forward to come up with a structure for this. So there's a lot of thought in that area. But if we look back at blockchain and its capabilities, it can be used for, say, voting, or it could be used for tendering. It can be used for making sure that you're following processes, whether it's taxes or anything where it's procedurally based. The technology can be a little bit slow. So if you want something which has an instantaneous response of like less than a second, you'll be challenged. As long as you don't mind, a little bit of delay on how it works, then it's very flexible and very good. As I say, it's dependent on many machines in many different places. So if you change one, you change them all, and you can't hide that. So it's depending on how wide that is and how you want to achieve it. But I think it will change and improve, but I think it's here to stay.
I know magic wands don't exist, but just imagine they do. I give you a magic wand and I say that you can change one piece of legislation or just the way we think or do things. What would that one thing be and why?
Well, this is a very wide-ranging question. Obviously, I can come up with 1,000. But from my experiences over the last several years, the biggest frustration I've had stopping most things is the frequency allocation, the frequency spectrum allocation to various technologies. So this may seem like rather strange thing to say, but for example, the frequencies available for IoT are very limited. So it's very constrained, and the reason why we have a lot of limitations on the IoT, the frequencies are just not available. We're struggling to get any of the frequencies for any of these technologies. So it's incredibly difficult to change that and move forward because of how they're allocated. But in other areas of the world, in Asia and America, they've got far better spread of their frequencies. So they can achieve a lot of things which can't be achieved in Europe and Africa.
So I'm going to take back your magic wand and I'm going to give you a time machine because obviously that exists. What will future African cities look like 20 years from now? What are you hoping to see and what do we need to start doing right now?
So one thing projections have told us is that the growth of the cities and the urbanization in Africa is going to outstrip everybody else, everywhere else globally. And it's predicted by 2100, that's 80 years from now, that 8 of the 10 largest cities in the world will be in Africa. And they're going to be like seriously mega cities with, 50 million plus, which I don't think there's anything that big at the moment. So, we're going to see a massive climb in how the cities work. And it's a scale which we haven't even seen in China yet, which we're going to experience here. And that's because we have a growing young population here, which the rest of the world hasn't got. So from a resourcing point of view and a population point of view, it positions us really very well for the rest of the planet. But we have to, with our designs now, and it's what I was always trying to put in through the designs I was putting forward, is thinking of how are you going to actually grow? If you're going to say in the next 20 years, the city is going to have double the population, how are you going to work with that? In Cape Town at the moment, it's almost impossible to get to work. You have to live very far out and it takes you so long to get to work, it's impossible. So how would you deal with that urbanization? We talk about polycentric cities where you have different centers of operating, different specialities. That takes a lot of planning, and you have to set up environments to persuade businesses and people to move to be able to do that. The urbanization and making sure that you can access the services and the moving to work then with that is really important. Your supply chain, have you got enough water? Have you got enough electricity? Can you get the food in? It's all critical. How do you get the education, the medical? Something I started looking at was in South America, why is it a lot of the major cities that existed there like hundreds of years ago and thousands of years ago, why did they just stop? Why did they stop existing? And it seems to be they ran out of food and water. It's just they couldn't sustain themselves any longer, is the current wisdom. So, one of the things I'm excited at looking at is trying to understand what happened there and how can you reapply that here. So therefore you can do, turn buildings into, farms, the urban farms, and you can create a lot of farming and everything else like that. And there's, some good initiatives which I've mainly seen in Nairobi. So Nairobi is where I've looked at it a lot more based on the situation there and how that can work, where they can use rooftops for the gardening or, part of the building or create greenhouses. Although curiously, one of the projects I've been asked to look at is seeing if we can build greenhouses in the Arctic. It's an interesting logic, but it's an exciting thing to look at. So what would I like to see? I like to see equality. I like to see the digital divide reduced. I like to see that all citizens are uplifted to make sure that we can have a good standard of living where you have access to the services you require. An important factor is we're living through this pandemic, which is catastrophic. And we need to ensure that everybody has the same level of monitoring and help to know how to handle the virus, because if you don't, you start getting a segment of society which are going to be ostracized because you don't know if they're healthy or not. So therefore, from a medical point of view, you've got to make sure everybody is looked after the same level so that you feel safe. So that is really important. And if we want to economically survive as a continent, we have to handle the electricity. So if the electricity is addressed, clean, decent water, which can be achieved in also many ways, then we're going to see a vast improvement. And then, reclaiming back land to do more agriculture and farming to support that ever-growing population.
With the pandemic, do you see rapid urbanization declining? I know there's a lot of projections saying that, like you've mentioned, there will be 8 metro cities in Africa. Do you think urbanization would slow down now from the pandemic? Is it a temporary slowdown and it will increase again? I've recently spoken to the South African Cities Network that said that the data shows that rapid urbanization in South Africa has already plateaued. at this stage, and that was even before the pandemic. So I'm interested in knowing, do you think people will still be moving to the cities?
I would think with the fact that we've now been almost forced, and we've been, we jumped 5 years in a very short time in how we use the technology. Now everybody's used to using teleconferencing and remote working. All of those people who can do remote working will probably prefer not to be in a city anymore, rather live in a quiet, relaxing environment where they feel comfortable and safe. So you see, I believe you start seeing a movement of those people out, and there's been quite a big movement, I gather, out, of which will start creating a lot more work for a lot of your less skilled workforce who would go follow them, and you would start creating more smarter villages and smarter towns, and hopefully that'll create a greater spread. I think the urbanisation has plateaued for the time being, but I'm sure that when the crisis is over and everything's settled down, due to the growth in population and need for work, I think it will probably start climbing again. But one hopes that it can be slowed to the point that it's possible to stay in rural areas. I think if it's a case of with smart technologies, it can be shown to be profitable and viable to do agriculture and that kind of work with these technologies, and you can actually make a living as good as you would do in a city. Hopefully that would persuade a lot of people to stay. So, I think it's the momentum's there to lead the city, but we can't, let that momentum stop. I think it's important we try and help it keep going.